I'm Tara, and our fellow panelists.
My name is John. I'm from Behind the Iron Throne podcast.
He literally was behind the Iron Throne and he walked out in front of it just for you all. So he's the man behind the throne, baby. Is that the intended wordplay there?
Yes.
So you big Little Finger fans?
My boss is.
You find him interesting?
Yeah, I find him interesting.
Yes.
I'm glad he was dead.
He did deserve to die. That is definitely true. And I am Lucifer Means Lightbringer from the Mythical Astronomy of Ice and Fire podcast. I like to talk about symbolism and mythology because there's a friggin' lot of that in the Song of Ice and Fire. And something that George put a lot of time into. And me and my crew of myth heads, shout out to some myth heads in the back there. We collaboratively unpack all that stuff on my Lucifer Means Lightbringer YouTube channel, as well as several other related YouTube channels. And we have live streams every Sunday, pre-games, and all kinds of fun things. So I'm happy to be here to talk about Winds of Winter because I have a few ideas about what we might see. And it's fun to compare what we've seen from the show to what we're going to see in the next couple books, because George just recently said, not going to be all that different. Now, different in the main strokes. Obviously, there's a big difference between, say, Jon's resurrection in the show versus what we expect in the books. But he'll be resurrected in both. So we're at an exciting time to sort of look at what the show's given us and consider what we think might be coming in the Winds of Winter. And besides a lot of people dying.
And I hear tell from, I believe it was Chloe, said that recently Martin actually said that he had oh my God, I'm blanking on the word. He had the book ready to go to a translator, 2 or 3 years ago, and
which one?
Winds of Winter, and decided to change some things, but so apparently it's a lot closer to being finished than we.
I remember that story. It's one of those you never know, the translator said something like, oh, maybe.
No, I think this was Martin confirming it, but this is coming from Chloe, so.
Shade on the panel.
No, she's not here. I can.
As long as you have that report. So.
Oh yeah.
The optimist in me thinks the book will come out either in the fall or next year.
I'm with you too. I'm pretty optimistic about it. I do feel like it's about wrapped up.
I've been optimistic for 10 years about it.
The thing that I saw him at Worldcon last fall in San Jose, and everyone that was there noticed the ebullient George. He was very feeling himself. He was having fun. He had the wise man hands perched on the belly at the bottom of the beard thing, and he was just eating it up. He did not look like a man struggling and chasing his ghost. He looked like, I'm gonna drop this on y'all motherfuckers. And so I just reading the vibes, but I've had a good feeling since then, and I've had a lot of the people that have seen him in the last few months sort of pass along that thing. So I don't think we need to fear too much. I think it's coming.
Well, I know that one of the things that both John and I had a very similar number one that we want to see in Winds of Winter. Yours being the fate of Stannis and the Battle of the Ice, and mine being the pink letter conclusions, what's really going on up there. And I was like, oh, this might be too close, but honestly, I think that's kind of. If you're a fan of the North, wanting to know whether or not, or a fan of Stannis, really, Stannis the man is. Wanting to know whether or not that letter of Ramsay's was just complete fabrication or whether there's some truth to it, and what's going on in and just outside of Winterfell is definitely a big thing that I'm excited for.
Yes, same here. I'm a big North fan, obviously Stark. I'm also a big Stannis fan too. I love
Stainer man, if you will.
Yeah, he's a badass. He's a very direct, focused person. I like that. But I don't think that letter is real. I think it's a way to throw Jon off, because I think Jon was going to go with the Wildlings to help Stannis, and I think Ramsay somehow maybe found that out and wrote a letter to Jon just faking him out, because I want to see this Battle of the Ice. And if the show reflects the books, in a way, I think Stannis is going to win and beat the Boltons and take Winterfell. Maybe he gives Winterfell to fake Arya. Maybe he gives it to Jon. I'm not sure. But it's interesting to see what happens after that. Does he convince the Freys to join him when he crosses the Twins? and I want to see how far south he goes into King's Landing.
I tend to agree that his arc is not going to end probably in the show where it does. And if he's going to be involved with either the burning of Shireen or coming along to appreciate what happened after it happened, which is a necessary thing for sure. Like if Mel burns Shireen, if Mel and Cersei do it, Stannis isn't there. It's very much still Stannis' fault because he's the one that invited this religion into their house, right? And he's entertained the idea for a long time of burning children. So to me, Stannis' arc cannot end until he takes stock of that. He's either going to be involved in the action or the aftermath. And there at the wall, Stannis is at Winterfell. So if he dies at Winterfell, I don't see how any of that happens. So I really don't think Stannis is done.
Yeah, I think, sorry, obviously it's, a lot of it with the show is, gosh, I cannot believe I'm backing the show here. A lot of it's time constraints, you know, but they did really, Stannis' end in the show was I think one of their missteps. It was very blunt and just kind of like bang, 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 you know, he does this, he does this, he does this, he's dead, and I just don't imagine that Martin is going to have him like go that way. But you know, rather like you said, his arc is not over yet, and I can't, like, he's got to get back to the wall at some point. I think so.
And I too am looking forward to that battle. I love all the Night Lamp stuff and the work that Radio Westeros and History of Westeros have done, talking about how that battle is going to go down. Definitely looking forward to that one. It's fun to think about. The next book's going to open with basically two crazy battles: the Battle of Fire in Meereen and the Battle of Ice in Winterfell. And I think both of those were intended to be in A Dance with Dragons and simply just did not fit.
Yeah.
So we're going to start off with a bang.
There's even more than that too, because we've got Storm's End. We've
absolutely.
We've got
Westerosi Agincourt is
and
coming.
then we have Euron in the Sunset Sea and going up into Old Town. Like
Absolutely.
There's a lot of
That's
violence
gonna go
that's going to happen within like the first 250 pages.
It's going to be some death, folks.
As if I haven't had enough of that.
Well, we do need to narrow some of these characters down.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So anyway, we've talked about the Northern Sands. What was one of your things that you're excited to see?
Well, so in A Game of Thrones, there's this obscure story. I'm just going to read it to you. It's funny because most of the attention of this myth is referring to the past, but at the end, there's a little prophecy about what's going to happen in the future. Most people haven't noticed. So, he told me the moon was an egg, Khaleesi, the Lyseni girl said. Once there were two moons in the sky, but one wandered too close to the sun and cracked from the heat. 1,000 dragons poured forth, drank the fire of the sun. And that is why dragons breathe flame. One day, the other moon will kiss the sun too, and it will crack, and the dragons will return. Now, my mythical astronomy podcast started because I looked at this myth and realized that dragons coming from the moon are probably meteors, because meteors are mythicized as dragons all through mythology. It's very easy to see the likeness, and that's what would happen if a moon cracked or was a part of any sort of celestial catastrophe. You'd get some pieces of falling moon. They would look like dragons coming from the moon. So that's what this myth is talking about. And oh, by the way, we've got a long night sitting around. We're looking for a way to cause that. Well, meteors can cause a long night, especially if they're magical meteors such as they would be. So that's what I think this means. I think that the last long night was caused by a meteor impact. And I think that if we're going to get a new long night, which we are, it's coming. The show de-emphasizes this. The sun isn't really hidden. The others just sort of walk around, and it gets cloudy wherever they are. But the real long night, as you know, the sun was hidden for a generation. That's even if it was only 5 years or 10 years. We're looking for something that clouds the sun on an ongoing basis. The long night was recognized around the world, from Essos all the way to Westeros. So this is a global phenomenon. And I know it sounds, and I'm leading off with the big one here, so this is a little, is there going to be a meteor event in the Winds of Winter? Yes. I think the Winds of Winter will climax with some fire falling from the sky. That is going to be the impetus for the destruction of the wall and causing the new darkness of the long night. We know the new long night is coming. It's got to come somehow. The sun doesn't just disappear on its own. And so this is the mechanism. It's going to be a spectacular mechanism, but essentially it's just going to be the trigger for the new long night. So I could be wrong about that. However, if there is a damn meteor in the Winds of Winter, you heard it here first, or on my live stream somewhere else if I've said it. So I've got more tame character-driven predictions too, but that is my biggest prediction that I've made in all my podcasting, and I've got my fingers crossed. It's good. I still haven't decided when I get the new book if I'm going to word search for Comet or just like read it and try to find it. But anyways, thank you for indulging me with my personal delusions. But there you go.
That's not the craziest thing.
Any comments on that, guys? What do you think?
I like it.
Does that sound like fun?
Because they've been teasing it, and we still haven't got anything. So to end the book with the long night, and then book 7 would be like the majority of the book will be that whole thing.
Dealing with it, right?
It goes. I've always had a theory, and maybe you're the perfect guy for this. That there was 2 moons once in Westeros, and
Yeah.
that the first moon crashed, and that's what caused the first long night. So
That's
I
what I'm
do like
talking
that
about.
theory.
You're
So-
singing my song, man.
And maybe then we get the night, maybe some Night King talk in Winds of Winter, because we haven't had any Night King yet.
You want to get into my other prediction?
Yeah, go.
We can
Wanna
come
go
back.
right into that,
Well,
yeah.
so this is one I can actually kick back to you pretty quick. So, Night King in the show is a corporeal, head other, right? In the books, we don't have that. We just have the White Walkers. The most White Walkers we ever saw was in the prologue, and there's 6 of them. One of them steps forward to sword fight, but he's twins to the other ones. He doesn't have a special crown or a special beard or any big sickle or anything. It's just a bunch of faceless others, nameless twins. So, I do think we are going to get a Night's King, a leader of the others. I don't know if it's technically the original Night's King, quote unquote. I like the idea that Night's King, when he was defeated originally, went into the Weirwood Net. And so he's like this alien presence that's like in the astral dimension, kind of wanting to get out. It's an old fantasy trope of the sorcerer with the soul jar. You kill his body, but then he comes back. I think the show is showing that with that tree that he was transformed against. It's a Weirwood tree. It's where he's turned into Night King. It's surrounded by these spiral obelisks. I really feel like his power is tied to the Weirwoods in some way. So if we get a book version of that where he's like a presence inside of the Weirwood Net that's looking for somebody to body snatch, like maybe John or Euron or Bran, then we could see all of a sudden a physical incorporation of Night King.
Body snatching brand might not be the
I
best.
don't love the idea of Stannis being that body that's snatched, but I feel like that's the one that gets pushed a lot, or maybe it's just the things that I read and listen to is that everybody wants Stannis to be the Night King.
I think he'd make a good Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. I think they want John, and I think they might get Euron. Those are my guesses. And I'm also hoping the show gives us like some Night King Euron overlap somehow, but that's even crazier. So.
Well, maybe tonight. I don't know.
Oh, maybe.
Stannis fits the Night King because he's already cold as hell, right? Like, he's already a cold person as is. Like his personality is he has no personality. He's cold. So he'd be perfect from the Night King.
Yeah.
Lives at the night for it. Creates magical shadow babies, giving his seed and soul to a magical woman. There's a lot of parallels.
Yes.
Are you raising your hand back there?
I was wondering if you think, he could possibly create Lightbringer to stabbing Shireen, if that could be her actual.
I could see them thinking that that's what they're going to do. I personally guarantee everyone in this room that we will not see a woman stabbed with a sword by our hero in order to save the day. That is essentially a big lie in the Azor Ahai myth that he's inviting us to challenge from day one. That the hero, what he has to do is to stab his wife with the sword. And oh, by the way, that accidentally broke the moon. But he's a good guy, I swear. No. And Davos is the truth teller there. As soon as Davos hears the story of Azor Ahai, he thinks of his wife, he's like, yeah, I couldn't do that, even if the fate of the world depended on it. That's the right answer. So.
Yeah, I've always felt that was it's a myth, like an exaggeration that he didn't actually have to. Maybe he did, but he didn't have to. I feel like there's always supposed to be.
Beric lights his sword with his own blood. He doesn't have
Yeah.
to kill any women to do it, so.
The only moral way to light your sword on fire is with your own blood.
That's right. And it gets into an important theme of the book, self-sacrifice versus taking others' life to have power and stuff. Like, they're very opposite ideas. Thank you.
We kind of touched on it for like a half a second when we were talking about all the battles to come, but one of the things I wanted to make sure I said is that I'm pretty excited for more Dornish in Winds of Winter, mostly because
Watch the taste.
they were just they were just so ruined in the show. I'm trying not to talk too much crap about the show because I've actually not I've actually been enjoying it recently, but yeah, they just the Dorne stuff was one thing that I think everybody agrees on. It was just not good in the show. So I'm really excited that we're gonna get more, the Arion chapters that have come out, or chapter, I can't remember if it's one or
There's
two.
I was about to
It
ask
was
you
too,
a
okay.
leading question. How do you see the Aegon, Phaegon thing playing out? I think that's interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like, I don't think anything is going to happen the way it's supposed to. She's not going to marry him or anything like that, you know, like despite their pacts and everything, I think it's going to kind of be not quite the Quentin and Dany situation, but, you know, unfortunately, I don't think Dorne is ever going to get anything that they wanted, really.
I agree with that. I actually thought maybe the marriage would happen, but then Dany comes with fire and blood, and the Martells have thrown themselves in with Phaegon. So even if it's a successful marriage, like it's going to lead to downfall,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
It's a tragedy. Is the point.
I agree with you. I don't see a marriage because I don't get to that later. I think Aaron will align, Martells will align with Phaegon and go to attack King's Landing. But you mentioned the Martells that are already in King's Landing. I think there's a plot. I think they're there to assassinate Cersei, and I think they'll fail.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're gonna try, but Cersei's not going to die by the Martell's hands.
No, I do think that because when Dany sees the vision in the House of the Undying, she sees the Mummer's dragon, which is Phaegon, and he's in front of cheering crowds. So I think that Phaegon will be successful and popular, and he's closely set up to be well aligned with the Faith, who are set up to oppose Dany because they don't like dragons. So I think what we're going to see is Phaegon take King's Landing, probably Cersei flees to Casterly Rock, not dies yet. And then Phaegon will essentially be the Mummer's dragon set up for Dany to slay, and then you will have the Dornish tragedy, because the Dornish were trying to ally with the Targaryens that had dragons, and instead they got, my name is Phaegon! And there it's going to end in probably a lot of fire and blood. And that's the chapter, right, with Doran talking to, when she's finally revealing the plans to Arianne, like 10 years late or whatever, he's like, we're going to get our heart's desire, fire and blood. And it's like, yes, you are.
It's just gonna be handed to you.
I mean, also though,
Well, they're going to get fire and blood, they're going to be on the wrong end of it, though.
Right. Phaegon might not have dragons, but he does have elephants. So,
Holocaust.
at least in the books.
Yeah, and
Cersei would be happy.
Yeah, I like the idea of Cersei fleeing. Do you think they will defend King's Landing or abandon it?
Well, my next thing is I want to see Phaegon. I think I can either see a land battle with his army and the Lannisters, or he just goes right to King's Landing and sacks it. So I can see either way. We're gonna get a battle. I just don't know if it will be a land battle and then a sack, or just a sack of King's Landing.
Yeah, and whether or not Cersei will, I mean, I don't really think Cersei's not going to flee unless she absolutely has no other choice. And then it's still going to be, I think it would be somebody like dragging her out, like kicking and screaming. The royal nap time enforcers.
I just thought of Rhaenyra as we were talking. When she took King's Landing, the half-year queen, she only possessed it for a few months. She did not sit easy on the Iron Throne and ended up having to flee. So that could be an echo.
Yeah. I mean, and Martin does that so often that like it's and so well that I wouldn't be surprised to see a sort of similar situation.
Do you think Jaime and Cersei will meet again in winter, or will it not be till January? I mean, until during spring.
Ooh, I think that could be held off now that you mentioned it. I could see that happening in Casterly Rock or somewhere else. I don't think Jaime gets back to King's Landing in time for all this stuff to go down. I feel like, let's talk about Stoneheart's cave. This is something I want to see from Winds of Winter. What is going to happen in that cave? We have Jaime, Brienne, Oathkeeper, Stoneheart, and a bunch of hobos basically in the cave there. I like that word, hobo. It's kind of fun. But, in any case, these are desperate people. Is the point? The Brotherhood without banners has taken a dark turn. They are sore pressed. Brienne asks if mercy or justice can be found, and not in this. It's dark under here. When men have to hide in caves, don't look for mercy. Point is, think about Brienne's dream, or Jaime's weirwood stump dream, rather. You guys probably all remember that. He lays his head on the weirwood stump. He finds himself in the depths of Casterly Rock. It's this watery dungeon place that doesn't really exist in Casterly Rock. And the highlight of it is that he has a flaming sword, and he's there with Brienne, who also has a flaming sword, and the ghosts of Rhaegar and the Kingsguard come out. But guys, this is Jaime and Brienne with flaming swords in a cave. Right now we have Jaime and Brienne with Oathkeeper, which is a Valyrian steel sword, in a cave with a R'hllor person who probably needs to be put out of her misery, and she's running on fire magic. I think odds are not high, but we could see Oathkeeper catch fire. I don't expect Jaime or Brienne to die. They will be leaving the cave. Stoneheart will probably die. I would love to see Oathkeeper take fire. Yeah, maybe. I mean, Stoneheart, the fiery heart. I don't know.
And I also I just can't imagine like it's not time for, again, like with the Sand thing, it's not time for Jaime or Brienne to die, and they aren't. Neither one of them is going to kill each other. I can't imagine Brienne having it in her to kill Jaime.
Never.
And I mean Jaime, I don't think would ever kill her.
I don't think he could either.
Like I can't even imagine them fighting.
Nope.
Not with their all.
I mean,
anyway.
fighting.
Like being
I see I agree with you about killing Lady Stoneheart, but I think Lady Stoneheart's gonna want to die, and I think she's gonna have a mission, one last mission for Jaime and Brienne.
I like that.
I don't know what the mission is. Maybe rescue Sansa, find Arya, something to do with their children.
Maybe they have a Lord of Light battle, let the Lord of Light decide. And if Brienne wins, then okay, I guess we gotta go with it, and they don't want to kill him anymore or something.
Yeah, something like that. But I think they're gonna go on a mission.
Red Wedding 2.0.
That's it.
Red Wedding 2.0.
I like where this is going. I'm already happy about this. Yeah, and we can take a moment to talk about the best scene in the history of the HBO television show, Brienne being knighted.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about that.
We all wept with joy. I mean, the acting. I hope we get something like this in the books. I have to think we are. It's the perfect culmination of her entire arc. And as I was watching this with my wife on the couch, she asked me, "Are they gonna fuck?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think so. This is headed towards a more emotional consummation." And half an hour later, we get the knighting scene. I'm like, it couldn't have been done any better. So. Well done.
Yeah, no, that's one of those things where it's like you see it in the show, it's like, oh, I really, really need this to happen. I need Martin to write this because as good as it was in the show, you know that if Martin writes that scene, it's going to be 1,000 times better.
Yeah.
God, I would cry.
Just what I loved a lot about that scene, and what I think I'm still looking forward, the fact that it's not really a spoiler necessarily, why I still would love the idea in the books, is that it's such an emotional closure for the Dunk and Egg stories, because Dunk never did get knighted, right? He very clearly lies about that
It's very poetic.
And it would be very poetic for the first woman knight in the Seven Kingdoms to be descendant of Dunk, knighted in front of witnesses. I think that was very importantly done in the show, that they had the whole room, every walk of life, behind Brienne.
I love the way the scene unfolded with. It wasn't after Brienne has done something new, spectacular thing in the Battle of Winterfell. They just stopped and considered her, what she'd already done, and were like, actually, you should be a knight. So, and I like how Tormund, the outsider, came in and was like, wait, what? That's dumb.
Big lady's not a
just
knight?
calls it out, and everyone's like, yeah, that is dumb. And Jaime's like, I actually could knight you right now. And I just love how there's nothing else going on. There's no other impetus other than they just start thinking about Brienne, and then they just make it right.
Well, and I mean, on top of that, Jaime, to bring the Dunk and Egg thing in, Brienne being a descendant of Dunk, and Jaime is a descendant of Rowan Weber, so.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get something like this in the books, guys. So I will look forward to that.
I mean, and speaking of shippy, slightly shippy stuff, I'm just going to get this out of the way. One thing that I am excited for in Winds of Winter, hoping it happens in Winds of Winter and that we don't have to wait till Dream of Spring, is because I'm trash Sand reunion.
Same.
And also, when I say shippy, I don't actually want there to be anything physical happening between these two.
I'm hoping that most people understand the Sand dynamic to sort of appreciate that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, the idea of Sandor laying down his life to defend the Stark girls makes a lot of sense. I think it's going to something like that. I wouldn't be upset if the Hound just survived as the Starks, guard dog or something like that. The body, like Jonquil Dark was to Queen Alysanne or something like that.
Yeah.
You can see that.
Well, I mean, and they don't have their wolves, so they need something.
Yeah, that kind of works. And actually, Sandor's symbolism is that of a hellhound, not just the hound. He's a hellhound. You go to hell, hound. Arya says when they're in the cave. He's got the burned face and all this stuff. So the direwolves are also hellhounds. That's what they are. There's, Cerberus. The direwolf comes from the Cerberus mythology, which is a hellhound, a literal guardian of the underworld. The Starks are all about guarding the underworld with their crypts and their King of Winter mythology. So the Stark direwolf and the Sandor hellhound archetype are cut from the same cloth. So if he became one of the, especially Sansa, who lost her wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's in the Eyrie, like, dreaming about, is petting the old hound, thinking that her helper is the hound. Like, you got the hound on my girl.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and a lot of that I think is just that he was kind of constantly there. He was constantly part of her path and her story when she was in King's Landing, and he was one of the very few things who wasn't just, even though he scared her, and even though he wasn't nice to her, he was like one of the very few things that wasn't constantly just terrible and awful to her. So, like, in a lot of ways, he protected her. Even when he was being mean to her, he was being mean to her because he was trying to protect her.
And the first time he stood up for her, what did he do? He put his cloak on her, which is the marriage ceremony of Westeros.
Oh, there's fics about that, man.
I know. I just had to point it out. I mean,
You had a question?
Yeah, what do you think is going to happen with Sansa in the Vale?
Sansa in the Vale? Oh, well, I mean, we did, does anybody here not read the Winds of Winter chapters?
Ready to step out of the ring?
Yeah, probably.
it's very polite of you.
Yeah, that's the one.
We'll holler when we're done, okay?
Yeah, that's the one thing that I'm like, we're all spoilers, but I know that there are some people, Ashley, from Podcast Vice Environment, she's like just not reading them, and that's fine, and I don't want to spoil that. Like, they're not published yet, so I feel that's beyond our spoiler spectrum. I don't know, like, because the chapter, I wasn't in, I love Sansa so much. She's one of my top 3 characters, but like, I wasn't in love with the chapter that came out with her from Winds. I think it was just seeing her like it's kind of almost like the Arya stuff in last week's episode, where like you see this person as like a little girl, and you see her in this chapter just kind of just flirting and being, I mean, she's learned apparently so much from Littlefinger, and I just didn't, I wasn't in love with it, but she's very clearly playing this game, whether she's playing it for herself or whether she really is at this point still Littlefinger's pawn, and when that's going to change, whether it will be, I think it'll happen in Winds. I think that she's already kind of evolving beyond him. She's learned enough lessons and she's smart enough that I don't think she's going to play his game for much longer, and she will have her own, maybe already does have some of her own plans, so.
Really interested in those Winged Knights and the politics that are going to be evolved around that, because we're going to have a bunch of new made power players after that. And those are going to be potential tools for Sansa to use to outsmart the Master and cut the Giant's head off. So,
I can't remember where I heard this theory, was where someone, I think it was Reddit, where someone was comparing, it was comparing Sansa in the Vale and this Winds chapter and all of her like suitors to one of the prequels, maybe.
Duncan Egg.
Was it Duncan Egg? Was it? Was it?
Parting.
Yeah. The 7 knights that fought. Was it the 7 knights that fought for Dunk? It was Reddit, right? I'm pretty sure it was Reddit. It was like basically all of her suitors matched match in some way or another the 7 knights who fought on Dunk's side in the first Duncan Egg novella. But yeah, so I'm really excited to see what happens with Sansa, because I think that I also don't know if that chapter is supposed to be her first chapter from Winds, or if there will be several like before that, because I feel like the Sansa that we got in that chapter is so different from when we last saw her that we're definitely missing a chunk of her, growth story. Yeah.
Well, I think 2 things I kind of want to say about the Sansa stuff in the Vale is I always found it really curious with the whole Harry the Heir setup. This isn't, I guess, even about the sample chapter too much. Is that George sets up this really interesting kind of succession crisis in the Vale, where if Sweet Robin dies, there's all these kind of contingencies, and it lands on Harry the Heir. And I always find it really interesting that, to me, the real interesting succession comes in if Harry the Heir dies. then what happens?
Oh, he's definitely dead.
Right? Like that, the interesting succession isn't about what happens with Sweet Robin dies, there's all this upheaval, and, Harry Harding becomes Harry Aaron and, rules the Vale, is what happens when he dies. There's going to be all sorts of, Vale households who have, married into the Aarons and things like that. And so
It's
I think
probably going to be Littlefinger's move, like is one move too many.
And then I also think it's interesting, we brought up Duncan Egg, and I've found the different parallel in the fact, and like this is, Littlefinger's quite clearly setting this tournament up as fixed, like he wants Harry to be one of his winged guardian things or whatever they're called. And the only other tourney in, I think, the entire series that we kind of see being actively fixed is in the Mystery Knight, and that does not go well. Like, that does not go according to plan for the people trying to fix the joust.
That's a very good parallel.
And with Sir, what is it, Glendon Ball showing up and like throwing a giant wrench into all those plans, and like in the sample chapter, I think it was like Littlefinger has all these different knights lined up that he is paying to lose or whatever, or just kind of trusts to be bad jousters, but we get. Who knows? Like some of these people, like this, there's like sistermen there, who aren't jousters. But like I feel like the people like that, there's going to be surprises. There's going to be people that are actually, there for a joust and trying to upset whatever. They're not aware of whatever plans Littlefinger has going on, so they're just going to upset them. And I think it's going to be chaos in the Vale.
The Mad Mouse is totally the snail.
Oh yeah, exactly, yeah. That's another good parallel.
I think Sansa's gonna marry Robin. I think she's gonna manipulate Robin into killing Littlefinger.
Sweet Robin has that in it.
But Sansa,
He does like pushing people out of
manipulate
movies.
Robin to do whatever.
It wouldn't be Sweet Robin like physically attacking Littlefinger. It would be
executing him,
leading. Well, I guess he can just command it, couldn't
Yeah,
And you can just
I
push him
think
out of the door.
she's going to
Make the bad man fly, y'all.
marry Robin. Like I think that's Peter's plan, and then Sansa's just gonna turn on Peter and have Robin execute Peter.
So it'll be like the Winterfell scene, but
Yeah, kind of like the Winterfell scene.
I'd love to throw that back the moon door, man.
Although I mean, they're not in the Eyrie anymore. And will they make it back there?
Oh,
Like,
good point. No,
yeah,
right, no, they
he won't go through the moon door. But
Oh,
yeah, I mean, there's definitely
I
already
can actually
some.
think of more painful deaths for people Littlefinger.
Yeah.
Give him a Shagga. Let Shagga do his work. Huh? Goats
Give
are
him a
hungry.
job.
Yeah, I was gonna say manhood goats.
Goats are hungry.
He doesn't have any manhood to feed the ghost.
Oh, fair, duly noted. Fair point.
Do you guys have anything else? Or do you want
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I was say you guys or the audience. I'm sure we have plenty of things.
Well,
to
So
do.
my favorite character.
You guys are doing the right thing, by the way, by asking topical questions as we go. So keep that up.
So my favorite character is Jon Snow, and I just want to know what happened. Obviously, how he's gonna come back to life. I'm intrigued how. I don't think it'll be like in from the show. I think he's gonna get set on fire. They're gonna burn the body, and he's gonna come back to life like that. And what's the word I'm looking for?
Or make it more obvious that he's Azor Ahai.
Yeah, it's gonna initiate cause salt and fire, whatever, salt and smoke, and I think that's the Azor Ahai we're gonna get.
So they're gonna burn John's body, and instead of burning, it's gonna be like, oh,
Yeah.
not quite dead.
You're gonna burn him and come back to life. I think he'll, just like in the show, I think he'll leave the Night's Watch and help. Maybe he gets in time to help Stannis with the wildlings, and then maybe he goes into Winterfell.
I like it, and I've written extensively about what I expect from John. I'm in tune with Radio Westeros on this, where basically John's spirit's going to go in the wolf for a few days. He'll be resurrected somehow. There might be all kinds of craziness in between, but eventually a merged wolf John spirit, because we know that they commingle in Second Life. When John's spirit is in the wolf body, after a few days it will start to merge with the wolf. And I think it's going to take a few days, maybe like 3, to resurrect him. And when what we're going to get is basically the wolf spirit and the John spirit merged and back in John, and he'll be like the wolf man, which is going to be pretty freaking awesome.
I also think we'll get something about his parentage finally in Winds of Winter.
Do you think it'll happen while he's in the coma dream, while he's dead, floating around? Finish that crypt stream, maybe?
Could be.
Fine,
I just think you've been teasing it for so long. We got it in the show. I think it's time in the books that some Howland reader, someone is going to bring it up.
It's definitely time.
Yeah.
I think that Melisandre will burn Shireen. That is how John will be
Boy, that's going to make John feel pretty guilty about that, huh? More guilt for John. That's
You can't
awesome.
feel good.
Man.
More guilt for John. It's perpetual.
Something for him to brood over.
I mean, it's yes, that's absolutely possible. I'd be real sad though, like for both Shireen and even I'm not a huge Jon Snow fan, but I would be super like sad for him if that was how he got resurrected. Like I feel bad.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is that it's Ghost, the wolf body, that's going to be burned. But again, it's not totally sad because the wolf spirit will be alive in Jon, so it's really just the wolf body that's going to go. But Jon is Mithras. For those of you who are familiar with Mithras mythology, Jon is heavy Mithras illusions. And Mithras, in order to be reborn, has to slay the white bull, which, oh, by the way, is a friend of Mithras and even in some way a part of Mithras. And so it's some sort of commentary on, like, you know, your inner shadow or something like that. But essentially, Mithras slays the white bull, which is his companion animal, to be reborn. And the bull's blood is a life-giving sacrifice. So, I mean, I think that's what we're going to get with Jon.
I always saw John as King Arthur.
I mean, there's always
There's no-
yeah.
There's
Nothing's
always
ever
something
exclusive,
more.
of course, but
Yeah.
We all have an idea of where certain POVs are going in the story, but I'm very confused on Ariel Hota's POV. Like how many chapters? Only 2, maybe 3.
Death by Dark Star.
That's by Dark Star. We need to
It's
go
coming.
straight to that. Like, what's
Yeah,
the
he's-
purpose of introducing him as a POV? Like, where are we going to be seeing?
So we can see what happens with Obara and High Hermitage, I think.
And without having, like,
You can't be in Doran's
Yeah,
mind.
otherwise we would know too much.
Littlefinger is a POV. You cannot be in a POV mind of a like inspiring
Schema.
character.
Yeah.
You have to have a drawn back camera for him. So Ariel Hota is like a little camera on a tripod, walking around. People conspiring.
Are we going to see like what this journey to find Darkstar? What are we going to see along the way? Do we think we're going to see Dawn, or learn more about House Dane?
Yes, and yes. So what I think, I have actually a very specific prediction that I put together with Aziz, actually from Radio Westeros, when we were talking about House Dane, is I think that it makes a lot of sense for Darkstar to steal Dawn. And that's because if Dawn's going to come out to play, if Dawn is important to the story, if it's Lightbringer or something other than a museum piece, it needs to get out of Starfall. Which, by the way, it seems like a lot of people don't realize. George has confirmed Dawn is in Starfall. It's not in the Winterfell Crypts. It's in Starfall, quote, waiting for a new sword of the morning to rise. So it's coming back into play. How's that going to happen? Well, Ned Dane is not old enough. He's only 13. Back when George was going to do the 5-year gap, Ned Dane would have been 17. And he's been training with Beric, and a Azor Ahai person with a flaming sword. So if he emerged as a sword of the morning with Dawn, has a nice growth spurt, that would have made sense. However, that's different. We don't have a 5-year gap now. And so what I think Martin did is he gave us Darkstar instead. And the reason why Ned Dane and Darkstar are actually interchangeable when they're completely opposite characters is because their only role would ever be to get Dawn out of Starfall and then die. And we happen totally different ways, but that's all that was going to happen. Like, Ned Dane is not an important enough character to wield Dawn against the others. He would serve as a way to get it north to Jon or somebody that can use it. And Darkstar can do the same thing. So what you're going to get, and I feel pretty confident in this, Darkstar is going to steal Dawn, then he's going to join Fagon's Kingsguard. Because Fagon is fake Rhaegar, and Darkstar is fake Arthur. And if you're Fagon looking for legitimacy, there's no better sign of legitimacy than a Sword of the Morning Dane with Dawn at your side, just like your dad had. So this has to happen. And if you want to find a way that the Fagon Arianne thing can go up in flames, well, let's put Darkstar in the middle of that.
And Daemon Sand.
And Daemon Sand.
That's not going to go well.
So this is where I think that is going. Darkstar is going to steal it, get it out. He'll be killed by somebody that, Darkstar is ripe for killing. And eventually that sword will get into the hands of somebody more important and magical. So
Hopefully a frantic man kills him, just like Arthur Dane.
Yes.
I'm on board.
I think Jon Snow will wield Sword of the Morning. I'm a fanboy. Because I think there's something more to that thing where it says, like, the greatest. You have to, like, what is it called? I'm mind blanking here. Like, you have to be like the Sword of the Morning.
You gotta be worthy.
You gotta
Yeah.
be worthy. I think it has something to do with, like, no one could just wield it. I think there's, like, magic involved, like, because anyone who wields that is automatically the best swordsman of their era. So I think just grabbing it, and I don't think that works. I think you have to, like, the sword choosing art of the warrior. And I think Jon, you hear the term rise of Sword of the Morning. Jon's rising from the dead. He's Azor Ahai. if Dawn is like, if Sword of the Morning's Lightbringer, so it's.
So check this out. Jon doesn't even need to be a Dane to wield Dawn for two reasons. Well, one, he actually is a little bit Dane because of Maekar and Diana Dane.
But if they ever said it had to be a Dane, it never, at least from my point of view.
I mean, it's implied.
It's implied, but it's
I mean,
never
it's always
said.
given to a Knight of House Dane. That's what
It's
it
never,
says.
but it doesn't have to be a Dane. Like I think. I don't
Well,
think-
that tradition
yeah.
is set to break, and here's what I'm saying is it's going to break because technically they could be like, well, there's no Danes around. You got it like 1/8 Dane blood, and you look like a warrior. That could be used as a justification, but really, what I think is that the Sword of the Morning, if it was Lightbringer, then it was used by the last hero, right?
Yeah.
Right, with me? Not doing tinfoil yet. So the last hero was probably a Stark, right? How else, right? Is there any chance the last hero is not a Stark? Raise your hand if you think he's not a Stark. Okay, so we have a Stark wielding Dawn during the Long Night. Okay, now the Starks have a tradition of calling their swords ice. Now it's a black Valyrian steel sword. The sword's only 400 years old, but the name is older still, dating back to the Age of Heroes, meaning thousands of years in the past. So the Starks, guys, have an 8,000-year-old tradition of naming their swords ice. How did this start? Again, the last hero was probably a Stark and may have wielded Dawn, a giant white sword. What would you call a giant white sword? You might call it ice, especially if it is unbreakable and can kill ice demons and it can withstand the cold. You're like, this is the coldest ice around. So guys, Dawn originally was the first ice of House Stark. The Danes are stewards, like the stewards of Gondor, and eventually what we will see is a return of ice to House Stark. And so Jon will be the Sword of the Morning, and he'll be wielding the real ice. There's some tinfoil for you.
Who do you think is going to end up with Longclaw in that case? I mean, I agree that Jon.
Maybe Jorah redemption arc.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense, maybe. Or a worthy passed along to somebody else. Maybe it gets broken by White Walker freaky magic. I don't know. Yeah.
Over there.
Are we going to get House Dane's words and you guys predictions on what those words?
Let's all take a guess. What do you guys think? And yes, I would think we'll get them.
I have no idea what their house words are or would be. I'm too tired to think to come up with stuff. But yes, I think we'll get them. The ones that I'm not sure that we'll ever get are the phrase. But God, I hope so.
House Dane. We're not really morning people, actually.
How about a late brunch?
Actually, Laura Brazos got an email from Elio Garcia about the words of House Dane, and George has written them and shared them. He wasn't happy with them, but Elio told us that he does expect them to appear in Winter.
Whatever they are, they're going to be really on the nose. Like, we guard ice for the Starks. The guardians of ice. You know?
Or literally something with the word steward in it.
Yeah.
It would be.
bring
Yep.
it on.
I'm sorry.
Dawn brings the light.
Right, and
Things
it
like
could be
that.
something very like thematically on
We
point.
bring the dawn. It sounds like some sort of sports channel.
Oh, did we? Oh, you came back in. Okay, sorry. I told you we were going to tell you when we were done with the Elaine spoilers. Okay, excellent. Thank you, someone.
Yes, John.
What marriages do you think we'll see in Winds?
Maybe Dany and Fagon.
Maybe the question is, what weddings shall we see? Because if you think about it as a wedding, then you're like, oh yes, lots of things can happen at a wedding.
Well, I mean, we've already talked a little bit. I mean, I think it's Fagon and Ariane is a. I don't really think it'll happen, but I think it's still one of the
Betrothal.
stronger.
I think it'll be a betrothal.
Yeah. So yeah, will there be a wedding? I don't know. Like I don't think Sansa is gonna get married. Honestly, I guess maybe that could just be me being hopeful because I just don't want her to be forced into another marriage. But
Jon and Shireen. Jon and Shireen.
that's some tinfoil.
That's some tinfoil for you.
Two dead people married.
If Shireen gets burned, it's not because of Stannis. It's Stannis will murder because why would he name Shireen his heir? Like, why would he send off Massey to say whether I die or not, still bring the sellswords, put Shireen on the throne? I think he needs the North, and I think having resurrected Jon marrying Shireen will get the North on his side.